In today's Leeds news, Sanches a concrete link, Spurs open to Solomon sale, Piroe loving life at Leeds, Fowler never wanted Leeds move, Leeds promised action over tragedy chants, and Sinisterra flopping at Bournemouth. Morning folks, Jay here at The View on Monday morning the 10th of February with your Leeds United news. Hope you've had a reasonably good weekend outside of the FA Cup exit from Leeds United, but bigger fish to fry this week, specifically with Watford coming up. Make sure we get something out tonight for that game. In the meantime, we'll crack on with the news. There's a little bit of small stuff to get into, more stories around what people have been talking about around Leeds, but we'll start off with the Alvin Sanchez story that came out this morning. And Alvin Sanchez's name popped up for Leeds during the January transfer market, and with the link claiming interest from Leeds in a January move, but at that time the player was said to be willing to stay in Switzerland until the end of the season. Sanchez has 8 goals so far this season for Lausanne in Switzerland and is expected to depart the Swiss outfit at the end of this season. He's totaled 11 goals in 25 games across all competitions so far this year. According to journalist Ben Jacobs, he says sources at Ellen Road say that the Sanchez link is a concrete one and the club are interested in a move for the number 10 heading into the summer. Over January, reports of interest surfaced, but at the same time also reports came out directly from the Lausanne manager, basically saying the player had agreed to stay at the club, who are in a title challenge this season until the end of the year, before then departing. Sanchez has been labelled as a player of enormous creativity in Switzerland and can play in multiple positions across that front line. Lausanne, as I say, are still in with a chance of winning the title in Switzerland, hence the reason for Sanchez's stay right now. But the manager himself has publicly accepted that the player will leave the club at the end of the season, and Leeds could pick up the player for as little as £7 million at that point when he does become available. Those in the know who'll know a bit more about European football will tell you he's a very talented young player. Whether he can do it at this level or not obviously remains to be seen, but he's a young player with a bag of potential and already delivering some of it in Switzerland already. And we've got a good record of taking players out of Switzerland, but we'll see what happens with this one. Moving on, let's talk about Manor Solomon. And last week we heard from Manor Solomon himself on his thoughts around the permanent stay at Leeds United and his eagerness to get back to the Premier League and to do so with Leeds. But now some news has come out from the Spurs side of things, and they may be open to a permanent move depending on certain circumstances. But in Leeds' case, also certain circumstances will need to happen before that move can happen. Reports today suggest Spurs are keen to stress that no firm decision has been made on the player's future right now. But speaking recently, Graham Bailey suggested that Jack Harrison's return to Leeds could be a factor in whether Leeds decide to try and make a move for Manor Solomon in the summer or not. Bailey believes that Harrison will be back at Leeds next summer, and that's pretty obvious. If Leeds get promoted, then Jack Harrison's loan release clause is no longer valid and the player has to return to the club. If Leeds decide to offload Harrison, though, which is absolutely expected that Leeds would do that, then a move for Solomon is said to be on the cards. Despite no firm decision from Spurs' statement, the reports also says that Spurs would be open to a conversation with Leeds around a possible deal for an exit for the player, but it would depend on the fee that both teams can agree on. So there is some interest from the player in staying at Leeds. There's some loose enough interest, I suppose, in Spurs being interested in letting the player go, and he's been very impactful for Leeds. Depending on what he does between now and the end of the season, I think is when Leeds fans will decide whether they want him to stay or not. But I think Leeds will also have a look at that as well, decide whether they want him around or not, depending on what happens between now and the end of the season. Moving on to Leeds' top goal scorer right now, Joel Piroe, and he has been speaking over the week about his time at Leeds so far. And the informed striker with 14 goals this season is pretty happy with life at Leeds. Piroe, so far this season, is Leeds' highest goal contributor with 14 goals and 5 assists to his name so far. That is the joint best total in the entire league so far this season, and Piroe has also managed 2 more assists than he did in the entirety of last season. Speaking about his time at Leeds so far, Piroe said the following: "This is a really big club. You can feel it when you walk around here. Everything, the atmosphere in the city, the fans and the history of this club. Man, around those matches, people here go wild. The experience is very intense. In that stadium, you are in a hurricane of sound. It's very special to experience that. I'm living my dream." It's great to hear him talk so positively about that. He's been under a little bit of pressure from sections of the fans this season, and But from a goal output, he's been in phenomenal form for Leeds this season. He's well on his way to getting 20 goals this season and hopefully firing Leeds back into the Premier League. You don't get a whole lot else from Joe Piroe outside of end product, but I suppose that's the job that he was brought in to do. He doesn't overly fit the Leeds system, but they've managed to find a way this year to make everything gel a little bit at least, and Piroe's finding the net on a regular enough basis for Leeds, and as I say, well on his way to 20 goals this season, which will be an important total if Leeds are to get up. Moving on to a little bit back in time, I suppose. Robbie Fowler's been speaking about his time at Leeds, and those who remember the financial crash around Leeds in the 2000s will remember the needless addition of certain marquee players at that time that really probably tipped the scales over the edge, and Robbie Fowler was probably one of those signings, if we're being honest. At that time, Leeds had Robbie Keane, Mark Viduka, Alan Smith and Michael Bridges all on the club's books before adding Robbie Fowler to the mix in 2001. Fowler obviously at that time was a massive Liverpool fan favourite, but speaking to TalkSport about the move to Leeds and his exit from Liverpool, Fowler said that the reason he left Liverpool was due to consistent disagreements with Gerard Houllier around the style of play that Liverpool had and how it wasn't really suiting him. But on the move, he said the following: "I'll be honest with you, I did, and I would never apologise for leaving because I wanted to play. In a silly sort of way, I'm glad I left Liverpool, but I genuinely didn't want to leave Liverpool. This is no disrespect to Leeds or Manchester City, and I know Leeds and City fans won't hold this against me. But I realised that these are not as good, or not as big, I should say, as Liverpool." Fowler obviously held a deep love for Liverpool Football Club over Leeds and Manchester City moves, but Leeds never really saw the best of Robbie Fowler during his time at Leeds and before he exited to go to Manchester City. Robbie Fowler scored 14 goals for Leeds in 30 league appearances at that time, and probably the wrong time of his career and the wrong time in Leeds history as well to be joining the club, but he moved on to Manchester City. Moving on, let's talk about some action over the tragedy chanting, and Millwall fans did what Millwall fans will do, and we shouldn't be surprised to hear certain songs being sung by certain sections of the Millwall fanbase. Millwall have had Turkey flags before at Leeds games, as well as singing songs about Turkey in order to try and antagonise the Leeds United fanbase. On Saturday, a certain song aimed at Leeds fans Kevin Spate and Chris Loftus could be heard coming from the Millwall section of fans. And after the game, Millwall manager, Leeds manager, Millwall Football Club and Leeds Football Club all condemned the tragedy chanting that had been heard during the game. The FA have promised a clampdown on tragedy chanting last season, and as of yet, all the FA have managed to do are issue statements against tragedy chanting with no real formal action taking place. The FA have promised action over tragedy chanting, and another statement in this situation won't really cut the mustard when it comes to Leeds, specifically the families of Chris and Kevin who have to listen to this at games. We'll see if any promised action takes place or if Millwall are allowed to continue doing what Millwall have been doing for years and getting off the hook every time that they do it. So yeah, not a nice thing to hear around Ellen Road at all. Shouldn't be happening at this stage, but it is. It's not banter. It shouldn't happen, but it is happening, and hopefully the FA finally do something about it. And unless real sanctions come against clubs for doing this, it's likely to continue moving forward. And then finally today, wrapping up, we'll talk about Luis Sinisterra's exit from Leeds and how things have been going for him at Bournemouth, and it's not being good for Sinisterra, being described as a flop at Bournemouth by sections of their fans. Last season, rumoured legal action was issued against Leeds United to force a move for Luis Sinisterra away from Leeds over to Bournemouth, and away he went, but it hasn't gone particularly well for Sinisterra. Then Leeds knew all about Sinisterra's injury history when they managed to recoup nearly all of the fee that they paid to bring him into the club in the first place, but now he's being described as a flop by Bournemouth fans. Sinisterra has had several injury spells since his move to Bournemouth and is due back from his latest long layoff around a hip injury this weekend. Sinisterra has so far missed 108 days and 18 games during his time at Bournemouth and the £20 million move that saw him move that way. Since the start of last season, he has managed just 32 appearances, 4 goals and 4 assists in total for Bournemouth in all competitions. Leeds won't mind that. Leeds covered the cost of bringing the player in. They've got an injury-prone player off their books and a player who very clearly, by forcing legal action, didn't have the right characteristics to be part of a club who needed to fight to get back into the Premier League. And I'm sure Bournemouth won't really mind about it either. They're flying high in the Premier League. Haven't really missed them so far this season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him in his future. But we're gonna cover a lot of the exiting players that came in around Leeds relegation time during the international break when we've got a bit of time to delve into other stuff and look at what's happened to them since they've all left. I'll give you a clue. Mark Rock's time at Betis ain't going great right now either. That'll be it for me today, folks. Massive thanks as always for supporting the channel. I will see you hopefully tonight with a podcast around the game coming up on Tuesday night. And if not, I'll see you in the morning for Leeds news. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.